Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Magdalenians. So we shall now proceed to the next topic, and that would be the pioneers of modern teaching. So I am Benjamin T. Guzman from Santa Anastasia San Rafael National High School, Santo Tomas City, Batangas, your first discussant. This time, we're gonna be dealing with 11 people from the past who, in one way or another, had contributed a lot to education. I'll be discussing 3 of them, and the rest will be discussed by the other members of Group 2. So let us start things up with the father of modern education, no other than John Amos Comenius, or John Amos Komensky. So he was born in 1592, and he died in 1690. He was a Czech philosopher, a scientist, an educator, and a theologian from Margraviate of Moravia. He also served as the last bishop of Unity of Brethren. He was a religious refugee. He was one of the earliest champions of universal education, and as educator, he was able to write Orbis Pictus in 1658 and Didactica Magna, both books sharing his insights about education. So we're gonna give emphasis on their contribution to education and other related topics, rather than their personal lives. So let us now discover the reasons why Comenius was considered as the father of modern education. So here are the following reasons. So Comenius was the innovator who first introduced pictorial textbooks. He also applied effective teaching based on the natural and gradual growth for simple to more comprehensive concepts. He supported lifelong learning and development of logical thinking by removing the technique of what we call the dull memorization, because he believed that with this technique, the learners were not learning at all. He also opened doors to education for women. For some reasons, women in the Europe during that time were not allowed to pursue their education, maybe because our country, based on our history, has the same reason that the society during that time believed that women are only meant to be housewives. So he was the first one to oppose that, and he opened his doors to women for them to be able to have an access to education. He also made instruction universal and practical. He also presented and supported the idea of equal opportunity, especially for impoverished children, because he believed that every child or everybody must be given education, everybody must have an access to education regardless of their gender and their economic and social class or status. So this is the one that I was talking a while ago. So this is from his book Orbis Pictus. So it's an example of what we call the pictorial textbook. So this was written in German and Latin, because during that time, Europe used Latin as their native language. So Comenius made it a point to use the language to make sure that all the European would be able to understand the content of the book. So let us now proceed to his principles. So Comenius believed that the teacher must use objects or pictures to illustrate ideas. Second, apply lessons to students' practical lives. Next is present lesson directly and simply. Teacher must also emphasize general principles before details. Teachers must also emphasize that all creatures and objects are part of the universe. Teachers must also present in sequence, stressing one thing at a time. and teachers must not leave a specific subject until students understand it completely. So these principles are still being utilized by the teachers of today, and actually some of these principles are part of our lesson plan, especially this one. The last principle. So we have in our lesson plan this what we call evaluation. So that determines if the students were able to understand the subject matter completely, or they have mastered the competencies that we would like them to do. So that determines whether we are going to reteach, or we're gonna move to the next topic. Let us know him more as an educator. So he believed that everyone is created by God and therefore must have access to education. So he believed in panoptism, so which means universal education. Everybody must learn every subject in Christian's perspective. He also believed that religion and education are inseparable. So that's why Comenius kept on integrating religion in the philosophy, or in his philosophy and education. For him, these two things are inseparable. So when we say panpsychism, that means universal education. For someone, according to Comenius, for someone to be called pansopic, for someone who has reached this state of panpsychism, he must possess the following things. So he must have political unity, he must also have spiritual progress, he must have religious reconciliation, and the last one is cooperation in education. So once that he finally have these things, then he can be considered pansopi, or all-knowing and omniscient. So the goal of education, according to Comenius, is the development of universal knowledge among all people, including women and children. Then educated people are those who sought knowledge from all sources in order to become more like the God in whose image they were made, all-knowing and universally compassionate. So for him, the purpose of education is to fulfill this what we call the 12 human desires. So we have the first one, to live. Second, we have to have a healthy life, followed by to know one's surroundings, that is perceptive to life, or be sensitive with the people or with the creature around you, to have understanding, to be free, be good and reject evil, to have and hold many possessions, to enjoy the use of property, to live an honorable life, to be able to communicate, to have a peaceful life, and finally to have an eternal life. So those are what we call the 12 human desires. So for him, this is the purpose of education. So let us now proceed to the influences that he had given the teachers of today. So the use of pictures, maps, charts, and other visual aids. So this is just one of the major influences that Comenius had given the teachers of today. So he even brought drama into the classroom. So he was the first one to recognize that the play of childhood was learning. In his system, there were four grades, namely the preschool, grade school, and high school, and this has been adopted by the system of education today. He was also an advocate of continuing education, believing that learning should be a lifelong process, which is definitely true. So before we proceed to another pioneer, let's have his words. So as the whole world is a school for the human race, so every individual's lifetime is a school from the cradle to grave. So how do we explain this? So Comenius would like to remind us that education goes everywhere. Education is everywhere. Learning doesn't only happen in school. It happens everywhere. It happens anytime. And every day we learn. Especially in our case, we are teachers. Just like Mr. Binaobra during our orientation told us that once you are a teacher, you will always be a student. So that is true because we keep on learning. And not just teachers, all of the people keep on learning every day. Every day we learn. So the only moment we people stop learning is the moment we die. So we shall now proceed to another pioneer, and that will be Mr. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So he was uh, Jean-Jacques Rousseau was born in 1712 and he died in 1778. So he attempted teaching, but he did not like it. He was not even recognized for his system of musical system. He was an insufficient secretary to the French ambassador in Venice. Then he finally moved back to Paris after his failed attempts, and he was a novelist. So there are also some information about his life. So he was born in Geneva. His mother died shortly after childbirth. His father was a poor watchmaker and dance master. He was 10 when his father ran away to Geneva. Then he was then raised by his mother's sister. So perhaps Mr. Rousseau's greatest contribution to education is the novel that he wrote called Emile, wherein Emile is the name of the main character of the novel. So this book showed his beliefs on education, and this book is consisted of 5 books. So we have the book 1 until book 5. Book 1 isn't is called Infancy. Then the second one is The Age of Nature. Book 3, Pre-Adolescence. Book 4, Puberty. And Book 5 is The Adulthood. So each book um, explained Russia's observation and beliefs about education and the stages of human life. So the 5 stages of development according to Rousseau. First we have infancy. So this first contacts with the environment. So this is wherein the child try to imitate the people around him. Remember that children are good imitators, so we should be giving them something good to imitate. Then the second one is for childhood. So this is from ages 5 to 12. So exploring the world through senses, wherein he started to, or wherein the child starts to observe. Next one is boyhood. Uh, this talks about the natural science, the changes that he is undergoing. So this is from ages 12 to 15. Then we have adolescence from ages 12 to 18. So this is the moment wherein Emil enters the society. And for the adulthood, so from ages 18 and above, wherein he experienced, or Emil experienced love, and he wanted to have his own family. So that is Rousseau's greatest contribution to education, the novel that he wrote. Another, Rousseau used the following key ideas in formulating his philosophy of education. So we have childhood is the natural foundation for the future human development. Children's natural interest and instinct will lead to a more in-depth exploration of the environment. Human beings and their cycles go through necessary stages of development. This is something that he had proven in his novel. And lastly, adult coercion has a negative impact on children's development, which is definitely true. So for the last statement, so precisely, adult coercion will give a negative impact on children's development, especially if these children were traumatized and they did not undergo to this what we call the psychological therapy or even counseling. So the tendency is that the thing that they experience or witness, they may do that to other people. So let us proceed to his philosophy. So he believed that people are naturally good, but they become corrupted by the evils of the society. So it had been discussed last week that the environment, the society, and its members, they do play a big part on the development of an individual. So he also believed in liberty, equality, and community. He disliked the corruption in society. He further said that our educational systems are totally wrong. Also, he said that there is no justice in the society. So, what made him believe in that? To believe in that? So maybe his dark experience, just like what I told you during the time that I introduced um, Russia to you. He was rejected for so many times. He was left by his father. Her mother died right after he was born. So I believe these things made him believe that during that time there was no justice in his society. So he also believed that the government should create laws that benefit most of the people. He believed in the democracy, and for him it is within the society that has produced inequality, competition, and the egoistic mentality. Then make the citizen good by training and everything else will follow. So how will we explain this? So if we want to change the world, we should be starting changing ourselves first. So we shall now proceed to the last pioneer that I'll be discussing. So that is the father of manual training. So he is Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi. So he was born in 1746 and he died in 1827. He was a Swiss educator. He lost his father at the age of 5. He did not enter school until he was 9. He did not have an impressive record in elementary school. So Pestalozzi was able to publish a book called Leonard and Gertrude, and this was published in 1972. Unfortunately, it did not become successful. So this became more famous as a novel or a literal novel and not as a treatise on education. So that means that people did not show an interest towards his plans on the reforms of the educational system. But it did not stop him. Instead, he persisted in his efforts and looked towards bringing about an awareness of the inherent powers in each child and man, until he was able to publish another book, which became successful, and that was called How Gertrude Teaches Her Children. So the book describes his philosophy that teachers must study child development. The book also explains that learning proceeds through stages, with children needing to master skills and knowledge before moving to the next stage. The book also promotes the whole child point of view that children's physical, emotional, social, moral, and intellectual development are integrated and united. And Pestalozzi called that the hand, the heart, and the head. The hand for the physical, the heart for emotional, social, and moral, and the head for the intellectual development. So for his philosophy, just like the other pioneers, he believed that children, including the ones who live in poverty, could benefit from education. He also believed that children need to discover ideas for themselves through their own activity. He also rejected punishment as a motivator. Instead, he believed that children are motivated to learn by their own interests. He also viewed development as a natural unfolding or blossoming from within, and with the teachers acting as gardeners who nurture the process rather than direct it. Also, he believed that education is not a perfection and the accomplishment of the school, but fitness for life, not the acquirement of habits of blind obedience and of prescribed diligence, but a preparation for independent action. So the purpose why we teach our learners is for them to be able to become independent and to be ready for whatever life may offer them. So Pestalozzi also maintained that the classroom should be like a family. The atmosphere must be loving and caring, like a good Christian family where the family members are cooperative, loving, kind, and they respect one another. He developed the idea of the family classroom from the way his mother raised him and his sister. So this means that we, according to Pestalozzi, and I believe this is true, we should encourage our learners to treat their classmates as their own sisters and brothers, and us as their second parents. So there should always be love inside the classroom, love and respect. So family is thus, for Pestalozzi, an essential component of education. He believed that without love, neither the physical nor the intellectual powers will develop naturally. So for his methodology, it had always been child-centered. For direct experience, the teacher must never teach by words. When a child can see, hear, or touch an object for himself, nature can teach the child better than the man. So activity, the child is expected to continually active in seeing for himself, making and correcting mistakes, describing his observations, analyzing objects, and satisfying his natural curiosity. Induction, the child must observe, learn to express his impressions of concrete objects perceived by the senses, and must learn to formulate new generalizations for himself. So, no books. He also believed that elementary education doesn't need books. Instead, it needs direct and concrete experience rather than books. In this way, the child proceeds from the concrete to the abstract. And simplify all objects or subjects. All subjects are reduced to their simple elements. The child proceeds through experiencing the simple parts of the formulate more abstract generalizations. He even introduced this direct sensory learning or learning through experiences. So Pestalozzi almost always promotes this what we call the independent learning among learners. So his influence on modern education. So he was able to teach Frovel, the founder of the kindergarten or the kindergarten movement. Additionally, his methods and writings influenced later educational leaders and other philosophers such as Herbart, Dewey, Montessori, and Piaget, which will also be discussed by the other members of the group too. Then lastly, allow me to end my report with a word from Pestalozzi, life itself educates. So that ends my report. Thank you for listening.